Hello, everyone. We are here to review Week 17 quarterbacks. Going to highlight a few of the most important games and quarterbacks of the week and of the slate and how they sort of fit into things. Uh, how do you feel about this slate in general for quarterbacks?
I mean, I think I'm more tended if you read the article, I'll be tend to focus on games that matter because I think that's where you're going to see the more elite quarterback play come out of. Still looking at Vegas this week, still looking at some cheaper guys, points per dollar wise, like a Blake Bortles. But there's also a lot of guys that I'll just be kind of glossing over this week as well. Your Phillip Rivers, Cam Newton,
Ugh.
those types of guys. Yeah, not really particularly thrilled with those types of names.
Yeah, and I think there's two names in particular, and one is your top cash game play. The other is not. Um, Interested in your thoughts on Drew Brees this week, compared to Aaron Rodgers.
So I think Drew Brees is a great swerve because obviously you look at this Atlanta defense, which has kind of held their own, but I think a lot of it's been somewhat matchup based. In a dome, while Drew Brees is on the road, I still think this game has potential for a shootout. Drew Brees is never one to really lay off. You're still going to get 40 plus passing attempts, 300 plus yards, multi touchdown upside in a game that doesn't matter for the Saints. So I like him a lot this week. I like the correlation plays that you can build within that game. So I think reasonable, he's a great sort of off of Rodgers, who, Rodgers is probably your safer play, but there's also that potential where Rodgers goes for 200, 250 yards and like one touchdown, and Ty Montgomery runs in another, or like they just have something weird happens like we saw in that Bears game. And then you're just kind of, you're out of luck.
So much like most of my 2016 season, I am irrationally confident in Aaron Rodgers this week. I mean, I was going to ask you, you know, what are the odds? Like, give me a percentage of the Packers scoring over 35 points against this Lions secondary. Like 85%?
Yeah, I think it's pretty likely. I mean, I think the team total is a little bit timid, 25, but I think that has a lot to do with, for me, I would just take the overall day. I mean, right now it's at about 26. Like four touchdowns for
Yeah.
the Packers is just going to be completely viable. And I mean, you look at what he's done, against Detroit in his career, averaging 21 DK points per game. The secondary, still a bottom 10 secondary, despite having that stretch there where they played pretty well. They got torched by Dak Prescott on Monday night. I just think overall there's enough value this week that is already opening up and will open up, that you can just kind of use Rodgers and Nelson, and still kind of work in a lot of good pieces.
I mean, Jordy Nelson is basically, heating up, was it NFL Blitz? Or
He's
what's the
heating
game?
up.
Yeah. And I mean, he's unstoppable right now. I mean, you have to make Rogers Nelson stacks right now. And, uh, he's your top cash game play, but he's just the top overall play. Like it's just automatic that the Packers are going to score on this secondary. You just watch them against the Cowboys last week. They have nothing. There are a bunch of backups in that secondary now, especially without Darius Slay. Adams, Nelson, Jared Cook, like it's just going to be an onslaught. Now, I guess one more question before we move on. Are you okay with going naked Rodgers, or would you definitely want to have a stacking option with him if you're going to play him?
I think just given the fact that I come into this week with Nelson as my top wideout, like
Mm-hmm.
Nelson's just going to be a guy I pretty much use 90% of the time in my lineups this week. So I just think, you know, there's the possibility of Rodgers finding like Adams or Richard Rodgers, or, just kind of something weird happening. I just, with the way they're playing, and, his targets are going to be 10 plus this week for me.
Mm-hmm.
I just still think you pair them together.
Agreed. Now, getting the other side of that game, I love this play as well. Matthew Stafford for 6K. You can really fill up your roster if you go him, D'Angelo, and Jordy to start. Obviously, love that correlation there. But yeah, Stafford, I mean, this Packers secondary isn't anything to ride home about either. So this could be a shootout. What are you looking at there?
The price difference is just phenomenal. I wasn't expecting Stafford to come away and be 6K this week. I mean, great game against Green Bay earlier, and I just think overall this is he's kind of game flow proof because I just think if lines are going to be able to get up in this one, it will come through the air. I think Stafford's going to be pressed to pretty much take this game and go win it because he needs to at this point. And you look at these two teams, I mean, allowing the fifth and sixth most DK points to opposing QBs. So this is a prime game to target for quarterback play. A lot of great options like Golden Tate, Jordy Nelson, Devontae Adams in this one. I just think the correlation between this game alone is something that I'm going to be all over. One, end of the night, you get to sit down, primetime TV. But this is, by far the game that matters the most this weekend.
Certainly agree. So that should be a really fun game and a lot of interesting options for sure. Kirk Cousins as a GPP quarterback against this Giants defense. Redskins kind of grasping at straws at this stage in the season. But, Kirk Cousins is great in these types of situations in terms of volume. What are you looking at here?
Yeah, I mean, you look at this Giants defense, very good passing defense. Top 5 per Football Outsiders. They're still allowing 251 passing yards per game, which ranks 22nd in the league. They're definitely bend, don't break. But you look at this, I mean, Kirk Cousins, Redskins must win to even have a shot at making the playoffs. So a home matchup here where Kirk Cousins has typically done well. I think there's a GPP upside here that most people probably won't be on. He's actually scored the most fantasy points over the last 5 weeks, just ahead of Aaron Rodgers, which I don't think a lot of people will realize. He's had a couple of monster games here over that stretch. So I think there's a reasonable total here with Vegas projecting 25. So, I mean, I think there's going to be some points scored there at home. They got to win. Giants rush defense has been pretty solid. I just think, given Kirk Cousins, he has that rushing touchdown upside as well, given they run a lot of kind of, bootleg play actions where he can scramble off to the side of the end zone. He's, down at the 2. He'll be a guy who sneaks it in. He can kind of give you that little extra. So I think a lot of people will be off him, especially at that price. I think Stafford's going to be probably a more popular play.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's certainly an interesting move. Another guy that's interesting in that range is Russell Wilson against the 49ers. My boy Paul Richardson certainly going to be getting some deep snaps there. Is that the reason why you're on Wilson this week?
Yeah, I solely wrote him up just so you could talk about Paul Richardson.
Yeah, I figured.
I think he's going to carry pretty low ownership, back-to-back strong weeks. We've been on this route before where Wilson's had back-to-back strong weeks and he comes out and just, lays down and throws for 110 yards and 2 interceptions. So We've been at this route before. I think people will kind of take a stab at Rawls or Collins this week, despite, whoever's starting. I don't think a lot of people will go back to Wilson, given that the guys that we've talked about already just seem to be the guys with the most buzz. And given the fact that Blake Bortles is still down there, I think he's still going to gain some interest this week. I think Seahawks are a relatively good team to kind of target for GPPs using Baldwin, maybe getting weird with Jermaine Kearse or, Jimmy Graham, who's been kind of quiet over the last few weeks.
Yeah, I think that's a good call. As far as the last value, I think we're all kind of looking at Blake Bortles after last week and saying, okay, in good matchups, he's kind of viable still. Maybe he'll be used. Maybe they'll split him out as a tight end a little bit more and get that moving. Next stage of his career is coming quick. So we'll see about that. 5,600. What are you looking at there?
Yeah, I mean, Marquise Lee is probably going to be second quarterback on the depth chart come next year.
Yeah.
So,
that was a beautiful throw. Beautiful.
You look at this, I mean, Blake Bortles has always done well against the Colts, averaged 19.6 DK points per game in his career against them, 26 DK points earlier, 39 passing attempts per game. This Colts defense is certainly still not good. Got to imagine that they're not – this is one of the few teams I do worry about this week that doesn't have anything to really play for, and that's the Colts. You can build correlation with this game, but I just think Bortles and his stacking options are just still tremendously cheap. Marquise Lee, Allen Robinson, both basically the only guys involved in that passing game, with the occasional toss to whoever back is coming out of the backfield. For me, I just think Bortles is relatively a borderline cash value option if you didn't want to pay up and really wanted to load up a wide receiver or running back.
Yeah, I like him quite a bit. I mean, you mentioned Stafford in that range as well. But, if you want to get that extra 400, could be a big deal in this type of week when you want to get some of those high end options to go with the value.
Absolutely.
So definitely like him. Anything else you want to throw out there before we head out?
I mean, obviously, Big Ben resting. I I think Matt Ryan is a guy that is somewhat interesting this week. But for me, I just prefer Rodgers or Breeze. I just think the upside's so much more than Ryan right now, and at a similar price. So I just, we talked about Coleman and Freeman. I'm just much more on the running game at this point than I am the passing game for Atlanta.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that's an interesting way to go for sure. As always, if you want to check out Jason's articles, certainly head over to dailyfantasycafe.com. If you like this video and you want more, certainly give us a like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. As always, good luck. One less point than me, one less point than Jason, and we're good. And as always, we'll see you guys next week.